Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we will start our next presentation in the Magic City Theater. Our guests include Mena, CEO of JM Studios, Martin Bravo, Research Manager of Metro One Studio, Hector Camps, Founder and CEO of Phi Cubed, Bryan Pravda, Principal Architect of Pravda Architecture, and Tony Cho, owner of Magic City Innovation District. Please make your way to the theater at this time. We are about to start our feature.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joanne Butcher. Hi, I am a coach. I coach filmmakers. I love VR. So I'd like to welcome our panelists up onto the stage today. So if you can come up. This is Bryan Pravda. Thank you.
Can we ask our audience members to move closer to the front so they'll be able to hear a lot better?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Come forward.
You'll be able to hear a lot better if you move closer to the front. Thank you. What a great audience we have today.
We'll share this. Thank you. How's everyone doing? Great? I know it's like after lunch, but come on, it's just amazing. It's the first VR Expo in Magic City, right? So it's amazing. First off, thank you so much for making it out here. I know it's a bit rainy. This is an exciting time for our city. It's an exciting time for the technology space. And so thank you for, hosting us, Magic City. There's a lot of interesting opportunities. We see, just the amount of technology that you see out on the floor. But really, I want to kind of set the stage a little bit on what we're going to be covering today, which is what does that technology, what's the impact of that technology in the real estate sector? So we put an all-star sort of panelist group here, really kind of looking at the implications of real estate and the role that emerging technologies are going to play in that. So we've actually assembled a pretty awesome team looking at every facet of real estate. So the entire life cycle of a construction project to engineering to marketing, and then leading all the way through sort of the commercial leasing. So we have here Tony Cho, obviously looking at some of the developments, everything that's happening right now with Magic City. He gave an amazing talk this morning. We have Martin Bravo, who leads a lot of the Metro One research efforts. And then we have Hector Camps, basically PyQ, a lot of the work that he's done on the engineering side. And then we also have Bryan Pravda looking at some of the architectural piece. So why don't we just kind of go around a little bit, do a quick intro of kind of who you are, what you've done, and then we'll kind of set the stage a little bit for some of the questions that we can address. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. It's an honor to be here again. We're really excited to have you all at the Magic City Innovation District for our first VR Expo, and I would expect many more cool events that are going to bring awesome content to not only Little Haiti, but to Miami. My name is Tony Cho. I'm the CEO and founder of Metro One, which is a vertically integrated real estate company focusing on emerging neighborhoods like Little Haiti and Wynwood. I'm also the original co-founder of the Magic City Innovation District, which you guys are part of at the Magic City Studios. So welcome. Honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Martin Bravo, and I'm the Research and Marketing Manager for Metro One. I've been part of the company for 7 years now, and my focus has been in really telling the story about everything that is happening interesting in these emerging neighborhoods like Little Haiti and Wynwood, Design District, and downtown. Thank you for having me.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us here in Little Haiti for this Innovation District. I am the CEO of PyQ. a company that specializes in the management of information over the building lifecycle. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So the building industry is transforming, and I've been operating in process improvement for the building industry from the perspective of virtually designing and constructing buildings and managing that building information over the life cycle. And today we're demonstrating how virtual reality and augmented reality intersects that space, allowing you to consume that data in a powerful and immersive way that we've never seen before in the industry. Thank you for attending. Please see me at the booth.
First, I just want to thank everyone for spending your time here today and listening to us, and also thank you everyone for putting this on and hosting it. Really appreciate it. My name is Bryan Pravda. I'm a principal architect and founder of Pravda Architecture and Design, and we're a boutique architecture and interior design firm that specializes in creating healthy environments that benefit occupants' mental and physical health and wellness. And part of how we do that is by embracing the latest technology and utilizing evidence-based design. And as part of that, we use virtual reality and augmented reality in our process, and we have for the past couple of years. So thank you.
So with that said, I mean, we have an amazing panel of what? Every area of construction, development. So, kind of taking a little step back, right? And seeing the role that technology can play in real estate. I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about, maybe Hector, kind of leading with you and sort of at the beginning of that cycle, right? And what does it mean in terms of sort of your experience and what you've seen over the last few years with the emergence of, AR and VR. So maybe you can speak a little bit to that.
Okay, so as many of you know, over the last 12 years or so, there's been the emergence of building information modeling technology that has entered the building space that has essentially moved architecture and design engineering from typically a two-dimensional process and has moved over into a three-dimensional process, driving every single aspect of the design, construction, and engineering process. And now today, many firms have over the last 12 years moved into that space. So for the first time in the professional history of our industry, 3D digital technology is now available to be consumed in a virtual reality environment or augmented reality environment. So we're seeing people start in the design process, taking information models and being able to interface with their clients in a way that they're able to completely immerse their clients in the space and not only just show them, but do real-time design changes in a way that clients have never seen before. So in the past, a customer would have had to wait a very long time or use their imagination to understand what their building is going to look like or what the impact of the design decisions are going to be. But today, an architect or a designer or an engineer or contractor can show a client or a stakeholder what the situation is in 3D in real time and be able to make changes in real time and get real-time feedback and real-time decision-making, which of course moves the project along in record time in ways that we've never seen before. So I've seen the hardest part of the design process has always been making decisions, and when you can get a client or a stakeholder immersed into the space to understand a problem or decision that they need to make, that decision could be made quickly and implemented in real time, which will move the project along in a way that we've never seen before.
And so following up on that a little bit, so I wonder if you can speak, so that's, in an ideal world, that's how things should be, and it makes a lot of sense, right? I wonder if you can speak a little bit to, is that the norm, is that the reality, right? And sort of what's been your experience? Because obviously from a background and the work that you've done with a lot of these, major projects, you're implementing that.
Sure.
But where do you see the industry in terms of a current state?
Yeah, the biggest enemy to everything I just said is the status quo, right? The status quo is not three-dimensional. The status quo is not real-time decision-making. The status quo is not companies sharing information, working together, and working in an integrated, immersive environment. That's not the status quo. That might be what Hector Camps does with technology over there in the corner of the booth, but it's not what happens in the industry today. But that's why we're here. We're here to say there is a better way. I've always looked at the way we've operated in this industry, and I scratch my head. I'm like, there has to be a better way to do this, right? we have to stop working stupid and start to work smart. And we need to be more collaborative and more integrated in our process. We need to be more transparent. And that's both what scares the hell out of the industry, but that's also the opportunity that we have. We are looking at a very serious technological process change for the building industry, one that should be embraced. So if we're thinking about building a technology innovation hub here in Miami, we need a cultural shift. And I'm here to talk towards that idea of creating a culture shift that embraces technology, not fights it. Too much of the industry right now is afraid of technological changes. They're afraid of what does that mean for their practice? How do they have to transform their business models to be able to embrace technology? And we want to, we've been there, we've been to hell and back, and we like to work with people to feel comfortable and safe in that space, moving their business models forward to embrace technology. And it's not a technology problem, it's a people problem, right? It's a cultural problem. And those are some of the issues, the real world issues that we have to address to embrace any of the things I just said: BIM, virtual design construction, VDC, augmented reality. People usually get mad at me because I can show them how we could build buildings without paper. And architects and traditionalists get upset because they can't imagine a building industry without paper. In the next couple of years, guys, we're going to be 3D printing buildings. Don't you get it? Right. What paper? What drawing? It's going from the computer straight to the construction site. And that's what's happening in every other industry in the world. From aerospace to defense to advanced manufacturing, they are 3D printing cars, guys. It's happening. They're not just printing regular cars, they're printing race cars right now. General Motors can print a complete custom engine that doesn't exist and put it into a car and test it on the track within 1 day. That's the world we live in, and that is going to intersect the building industry. Before you know it, it's not going to be the same industry anymore.
Thank you for that. So, and I think, you bring up an important point, right? Sort of as the acceleration of these exponential technologies kind of take place, right? Whether you're looking at building community, or you're looking at construction patterns, or you're looking at how you basically market and sell and sort of present that vision, I think there's one area that goes on between the engineering side, and then we go to Bryan looking at sort of the experience from an architectural, right? And what that journey has been for you, and what are some of the challenges you've seen with some of the work that you're doing now, and sort of the adoption of some of those technologies. So if you can speak a little bit to that.
Sure, thank you. I'll pick up exactly on that. So my experience, to give you some background on my perspective, started in architecture back in 1996, and did my first VR of a building in 1999 when it was like Lawnmower Man style, and really accelerated through architecture, worked with some big name design firms, and my passion is really design and service. And when the market tanked, around 2007, 2008, I got highly involved with building information modeling and helping my office that I was working for shift and change to that, and doing 3D and clash detection and things that make the process better. And it's about 3.5 years or so ago, I was working at a firm like a lot of other people, and I was trying to implement change and say, hey, there's a better way to do this. You can be more efficient. We can provide a better product and service to our clients. We can build a better building. And I was kind of running up against a brick wall, because architecture is one of the world's oldest professions, and it's a question whether it's this or something else that's more popular. But from the very beginning of time, you needed shelter. So there were architects. And a lot of our profession is steeped in, well, this is the way things were always done. And the way that I run my business is we're traditional in our values. We treat people right, we do things honorably, we're honest, we'll tell you what you have to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear. But with everything else, I question everything, and we come up with the best solution for every question, every challenge throughout a project. Not just, oh, this is how things were done. I say, why? Well, how can we do it better? And so when we set up our firm, we were looking and said, well, look at all these other industries, at Uber, at Google, all these different innovative companies and how they're disrupting the environment. And I was looking, well, in architecture and design, we are the most inefficient industry there is. McGraw-Hill did a study showing we're 40% unproductive with our time. And so that's not acceptable. You know, clients are paying for this. This is usually, whether it's a home or a development, it's where you spend the most money you'll ever spend in your life is in your property. So I said, well, how can we make this more efficient? How can we give clients something better? Part of that's with VR, but that's a small part. It's also about harnessing the data that we have in buildings. You know, what I do with my clients, for example, when they're doing VR, they don't necessarily know this, but I actually look and see how much time they spent looking in a certain area, look at the analytics of everything and know, okay, this is where we can make it better for them and streamline the process and give them a better building and also a better environment for themselves throughout the design process and in the building we create.
Great, thank you for that. So, like Hector, right? So that's great, and you're already implementing that. What are some of the challenges that you've seen in the adoption of that process? Did you just brief?
Sorry. Yeah. So to answer more directly, the challenge, I'll tell you, clients love it. There's been no challenge or problem there since I started my own firm a few years ago and showed clients what we can do for them. Usually they don't quite get it, or I'll say we do VR and they kind of look, okay, like you have a gaming. No. Like what we have is a mobile desktop. It's really the most advanced in the industry. One of the things we did was invest in our technology and our people, not in our buildings and things like that. But the challenge, I'd say, especially when I worked at other firms, I would find that I'll say that people in power sometimes want to hold on to their power. I was very fortunate to have an amazing boss when I worked in Texas, who was very humble. I came in, I worked for Caesar Pelli, like high-end design firm, kind of cocky, 20-year-old, and he said, okay, you can implement this, you can make us more efficient and make us more money, and I said, yes, and he gave me that opportunity. And at the same time, I worked with some of the older people in the firm where they knew construction very well, which I didn't know. I knew the technology. And we kind of traded off. I taught them the technology. They taught me how to do construction documents properly. And it was a great relationship, great marriage. I moved here from Texas, and I'll be honest, it was very challenging. I met some people who were excellent and loved the technology, but then they were suffering in design. They kind of, you can do numbers, but not make it pretty. And I would say part of it as an architect, I think the most important parts are, one, you have to marry the right brain, the left brain, kind of, the science and the art. You have to be good at both. And then the third thing, which is most important in my opinion, is having empathy or emotional intelligence, and know that you're not building the space for yourself. You're building it for your client. So what's important to your client? And that's the first thing we do in a meeting is we set up a project goal and say, okay, what will make this successful for you? And so having those three elements, I think, is what really makes a good architect and architecture. And what I found was trying to implement change, a lot of the standard bearers locally, at least in South Florida, were very resistant because they say, hey, we're doing this, we're making money, and that's all they care about. And I said, that's great. I can make you more money, and I can give something better to the community and to the clients. And because I kept running into the challenge of people just not wanting to change. I mean, people right now, they're stuck still trying to go from 2D to 3D that I did 12 years ago. And now, there's 4D, 5D, 6D, which is all about the life cycle of the project, putting in links to the specifications, everything in your model. What I like to do, I say we do 12D, which is the 6D, plus we capitalize on your 5 senses, and we try to touch your soul. Because there has to be something more powerful, more meaning in what we're creating.
So I think that's a perfect segue. I think you guys know who I'm going after here. So given that's the case, and obviously there's a lot of inefficiencies, we're seeing these challenges both from engineering to architecture, and I think for those of us who are crazy enough to be in the AR, VR space, right, and seeing the future of it, I think I want to kind of leave that up to you, Tony, because in many ways I feel like, the work that you guys have done in reshaping neighborhoods, right, and all the work that you're doing around building community, how do you see technology playing a role within that vision?
Well, like Hector said, I mean, they're 3D printing buildings and cars already, and I have a friend of mine who's a developer in China who prefabbed a 56-story, high-rise in Shenzhen, and so technology obviously is the way forward of how we're innovating and getting around these inefficiencies that exist in the built environment. And the problem is that technology is moving so quickly, but the built environment is moving so slowly behind what the advanced pace of technological advances. So from somebody like myself, who's more of a concept and a vision guy who believes in building community around art, culture, entertainment, and innovation, like what we did in Wynwood, which was kind of a unique new thing that was all around art and culture, and specifically the street art movement. Kind of the reason that Wynwood became so successful was because it was right on that uptick when Instagram and social media hit. And so that became a big part of why the success of Wynwood happened. It wasn't only because there were beautiful murals on the building, it happened to be the intersection between social media and the built environment coming together. So the whole concept behind Magic City is that it's the innovation of real estate development, community building, innovation and technology, and everything today has technology involved in it. If you're not innovating, you're going to die and you're going to become obsolete quicker than you would be before because things are accelerating so quickly. I was at a tech conference in Montreal, at C2 Montreal, and a friend of mine who invented 3D printing is working on 3D food printers now that will be the next appliance in everybody's household, and with the goal to end world hunger. So there's so many advances that we're going to see in our lifetime that are happening so quickly. We would be absolutely foolhardy not to work with gentlemen like this to really make decisions. And as developers and as investors in real estate in the built environment, if you don't have tools like virtual reality, mixed reality, and 3D rendering to really walk through what the future of a building looks like, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and often fatal mistakes, because a project like Magic City is a 15-year project. So how do you anticipate where we'll be in the world, in the Internet of Things and technology and innovation, even 3 years from now or 5 years from now? We can't even imagine the dramatic changes. We might not even have parking garages within the next 5 years with self-driving cars and shared ride systems like Uber and Lyft, et cetera. So what do we do with all these obsolete structures? Well, my passion has always been adaptively repurposing old and historic buildings and bringing new life to them. So it's about adapting and evolving to all this technology and working and connecting, the programmers and the analysts and connecting the tech guys with the community builders, because most of the real estate developers are not my age. They're mostly a lot older typically, because it's a very capital intensive business and usually requires a lot of risk and a big pocketbook, and a big balance sheet. Well, now with the advent of blockchain and cryptocurrency and the tokenization of various assets, you're going to see the accessibility and the decentralization and democratization of access to real estate and other assets that will really kind of level the playing field. And that's what I'm most excited about. And that just shows you how technology is really going to transform inner cities and urban areas. And that's really what we're most interested in. And how do you communicate that with all the various stakeholders, the investors, the community? And without tools like, augmented mixed reality and virtual reality, it's very hard to see what a community may look like and really avoid potential pitfalls. So I'm a big advocate of technology in the built environment. I think, as we focus on sea level rise and climate change and resilience and some of the biggest issues that we face here, gentrification and affordability and education and transportation, technology is really at the core of that. And without it, if we don't embrace it, we're not going to advance and solve big problems.
So I think that's a great point, and I'm not sure, you touched on something that was pretty interesting as far as, the built environment and how sort of you've seen the transformation of Wynwood and how technology played a big role within that. It reminds me of some of the work from Stuart Brand. I'm not sure if you're familiar with some of his, there's a concept, for those of you who are not familiar with it, he really wrote around, the clock of the long now, right? Which is really taking all these layers around, sort of the first layer that changes usually is fashion, right? And then you have commerce, infrastructure, governance, culture, and then finally you have nature. It seems like you kind of started the other way around in many ways. So you've started with these sort of this shift that's happening now between the turbulence of a cultural change or the turbulence of a new area of a city being reborn. And because of these sort of technologies like Instagram or Facebook that made it possible, you were able to capitalize and kind of bring that to the forefront in Wynwood. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to knowing what you know now and the experience you had in building communities and developing and reshaping neighborhoods in Wynwood. What are the next big trends that you see for Magic City, and how are you capitalizing now to better position yourself and your company to succeed?
So The way that I see Magic City is that it's a laboratory. It's a laboratory to experiment with all new technology, all new ideas, to have dialogues like the one we're having now. And it's really a place where we don't pretend to have all the answers. We're not going to necessarily solve world hunger and gentrification ourselves without co-creating a solution together. We have the right intention to want to do that, and we want to help the community. We want to elevate people, and we've really, gone the extra mile to create a foundation. But these are Herculean efforts that need to be handled on a global scale, that it can only be leveraged through technology. So the way that Magic City is structured, it's a multi-phase, multi-pronged, 15-year project. We're literally in phase one. Even though I've been involved in the project for 12 years, we're kind of at the starting line of what is it like and how are we envisioning creating the neighborhoods and the cities of the future. We're going to rebuild the entire world over 2 times in the next 30 to 50 years. We better do it right. If we don't, there will not be a built environment for us all to live in, because there will be 10, 11, 12 billion people trying to coexist. And if we don't end world hunger and this disparity between rich and poor and the haves and the have-nots, it's going to be total chaos. So we don't really have an option, because 72% of the world's populations will live in cities by 2050. Many of us will be alive to see that happen. And you can imagine the changes that are going to take place. And I believe that it's through technology and innovation and the will and the intention to solve these problems, raise awareness around the environment, climate change. But I think that's going to happen through this collective community and the consciousness that's happening, as we reach that tipping point, because we're kind of at that point, almost past the point of no return in a lot of different categories, but yet on the cusp of solving all these great problems, curing cancer, curing a lot of diseases and things like that. And so I think we're pushing, the light is starting to shine over darkness. And I think that, capitalism, frankly, is changing and evolving. And I think that's a very good thing. It was an imperfect but good system. And I would say I'm a social capitalist as well. But there's a lot of changes that are really exciting that are happening, and there's a lot of things that are really scary happening simultaneously. So I think that...
What are those things that, in your view, keeps you up at night as you're kind of thinking about sort of these new trends? What are some of the things that, in your role, and obviously some of the passion that you have for helping?
I mean, climate change, affordability, access to food and water. I mean, basic things. I mean, those are the things that I think at this stage, with the amount of wealth and resources that this world has, is really unacceptable as an evolved society to allow that many people to go to bed hungry every single day. It's just irresponsible. And if all of us aren't making an effort to make the change, it's going to bite us all in the ass. It doesn't matter how nice your car is. It doesn't matter what kind of a gated community you live in. You can't expect you can't escape somebody who wants to feed their children and feed themselves. They will kill for food. So this is just a reality that I don't think people, because we live in a very sheltered, enclosed environment, we have to really have a big awareness of what's happening around in the world. And so to get back to the point, because I went a little far afield, is Magic City I see as a laboratory to test all of those theses together, to co-create a city of the future. So it's open source, This is the first of many events that we're going to be having around technology and innovation. So we welcome everybody who's sitting in this panel, those of you on Facebook Live, to really bring your best ideas forward. This is an incubator for cities of the future. So we don't pretend to have all the solutions. We don't have all the technology implemented, but we have a desire to help create and support that innovation ecosystem and move the needle in the area of urban renewal, in areas like Little Haiti that are very poor, very underserved. But my vision of what would success look like in Magic City is we go into Edison or Tucson Senior High School and we provide scholarships for kids who want to learn how to code or who want to learn blockchain, and they become the next Steve Jobs, and they come out of Miami. So in Wynwood, we incubated Zach the Baker, we incubated Panther Coffee. Now, these are some of the biggest household names in Miami. Same thing in technology and solution-based, community development. That's what we hope to do here. And we hope you guys will be involved.
That's great. So obviously a big vision, right? Exciting vision. Obviously, there's a purpose behind that. I want to talk now to the guy who is responsible for selling that vision, right? And figuring out, with all these things happening. Martin, I wonder if you can speak a little bit to sort of what role do you think these technologies play in your, sort of current position as far as, marketing some of these new efforts?
Absolutely. So really what fuels real estate in part is not only the demand for real estate, but the marketing behind it. So if you look at the commercial and residential real estate industry, it has really lagged behind some of the design and construction industries, because ultimately your clients are primarily other businesses. Our clients selling real estate is the consumer. So how does the consumer really interact with this technology? It's through the internet, it's through your iPad, it's through your smartphone. So as we see these devices evolving is when we're really able to take advantage of how we communicate the message and how we really sell real estate. So if you want to look at specific examples, so if you're looking to buy a house, wouldn't it be amazing if you could interact with the environment and not only look at a fancy brochure or fancy images, but really design the space in a way that really fits your needs, and really look at the vision of that space so that you can make it your own. And I think that kind of feedback from ultimately the consumer is really important for our industry.
That's great. And I wonder if you can speak just briefly in terms of, I know that you guys at Metro One do a lot of work around research, right? And maybe the importance of kind of bringing in the right type of information for a specific project. I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about sort of what that process is, the importance that plays within your role.
Yes, of course. So in terms of research, you ultimately have to really understand the consumer. You have to really be able to tell the story so that they're engaged into the process of interacting with those spaces. In terms of research, let's say you're looking at a building that you're very interested in. You not only want to understand that building, but you also want to understand the environment in which that building is, and ultimately technologies that we use and that people in our industry are starting to use really help you model the different areas so that you can really see what's going to go around it, and really make a more informed decision so that you're not just selecting a space, but really you're selecting your neighborhood and selecting how your space is going to interact with the rest of the neighborhood.
So speaking of interacting and playing different roles, I think there's there's a lot of data that kind of comes into that. Hector, I know that's kind of your area of expertise, right? And so what are you seeing now with what people are asking or what clients should be asking based on this new model of building?
Yeah, so there's a couple words you mentioned the word community, and another big word is accelerate. These are very important things I wanted to touch in, because all this is coming together, and I'll get to your question here in a second.
I was saying the mic so we can see.
Right. So, if you guys can hear me okay?
Yes.
So, right now we're looking at a world that's absolutely accelerating. And the community is going larger than the neighborhood. I'm going to make a small prediction. When we hit 1 gigabyte per second, what that's going to do to the world is going to allow you to work in 3D in real time with people all over the planet. Right now, we're starting to experience that. And how do you work together with communities? That community is expanding. Architecture is no longer, design, architecture, engineering is no longer a local business. It's become a global enterprise. And buildings are being sourced. For example, if we mentioned the Sahadi Tower here in downtown, the whole facade of that building is being manufactured in Dubai and is being shipped to Miami and is being installed. In this situation where curtain walls are being fabricated in places as far as China, and they need to get to Miami or to San Francisco or anywhere else in the world for that matter, and it needs to be right the first time. So how do we work together? How do we share information? How do we collaborate in this virtual brand new world? There is a social science that needs to come into place, because I like to say that we've never really collaborated before. We don't know what it means to co-author a building when the architect and the engineers and designers are all making decisions in real time about a building, how do we then do not step on each other's toes as we are co-authoring buildings in a real-time global community environment that we've never seen before? Right now, you're looking at technology that, as it goes across the globe, I might be looking at a model in English. It may show up in Chinese in China, and we're looking at the same data. So learning this new collaborative workflow space that expands you not only locally, but across the region, across the country, and across the globe, I think is a very important touch point. Moreover, the last piece of it is always the consumer, right? So to bring it back to augmented reality for a moment, building information models is the front end of the data capturing process that needs to be done, and needs to be stored, and it needs to be shared. So the end user, let's call it the consumer, when he walks around the building space of tomorrow, when he looks at a wall, a chair, a piece of information, he knows who was the designer of this building, who was the engineer that engineered this building, who constructed this wall, what's their phone number, what's their email, and this information is going to be around you in an augmented way, but it begins with us today. It begins with the architect the moment he touches that keyboard and starts inputting data, and we can take it from the perspective of the last planner. Whoever is the last person to intersect with that data, they're going to contribute to that data. That data needs to be managed, it needs to be shared, it needs to be extensible. And that's the world that we're looking at today. So, going to your question, if an owner, I always say to the owner, before you write your specs down, everyone's thinking about just building the building. They're not thinking about what happens when we cross the finish line. All too often I see, for example, I've been involved in many projects where we've implemented building information model, and the only thing anybody ever cared about was crossing the finish line. When we cross the finish line, the building is built, the owner is happy, they don't care, they're looking to get into their building, and sure, we give them the data, or the team gives the data over, and that's where it dies. But the truth is, that's a big mistake. Right, that data needs to be captured, and it needs to be available into the future, into operations, and even beyond. Because when you look at the city of Miami right now, I don't recognize the city anymore. I walk around streets, and like last week there wasn't a building here, and today the building is finished. I don't even see the construction dirt anymore, right? And I'll turn to my girlfriend, like, do you remember what was here before? She has no idea, right? She's like, I don't remember what was here. So buildings are coming up, buildings are coming down. I've seen stadiums in my lifetime come up and down. They're gone, they're not there, and there's no history of them anymore. So I think this model of a digital twin of our city becomes important because our city is constantly changing. Our built environment landscape is constantly changing. And we don't even have a historical document that you can experience in 3D. You can go back to what was Lincoln Road 20 years ago. Can you show me what Lincoln Road looked like? I mean, we'll go look at pictures, but there's no reason for us to be looking at pictures. We can capture this information in 3D, and I think it's going to have a life of its own. So as I see the future going forward, I see two things happening. I see a built environment happening, and I see a virtual environment, let's call it a digital twin, existing, and we need to figure out how the digital twin and the physical reality are going to intersect. I'll give you an example. Just a few minutes ago, I ran out to Best Buy to pick up some hardware for today's show. And we tried to buy the hardware as we were driving to Best Buy, and we got frustrated because we could not buy the hardware and just pick it up. And it was easier to buy it online than to go to the brick and mortar store. So the brick and mortar store is disconnected, the supply chain is disconnected from what's online, and we needed this to happen in real time. This is why physical brick and mortars are failing. They're failing to online retailers because they're not intersecting data to respond to the needs of the users of today. So I think how we manage our information in the building industry is going to become critical on how we add value into the future going forward. And this, you need to define this in the beginning or I can tell you from experience of the last 20 years, if you don't define it in the beginning, you're not going to get it at the end. You need to have some idea where you want to go.
So just to make sure I understand, so really it comes back to the more information that you have, right, within a specific building model, the more the education role plays in for those stakeholders. Is that sort of the...
That's right. So the owners have a tough question they need to ask for from their design team, engineers, and suppliers. Hey, yes, my building matters, but we need to capture this data. You need to put into the specs that you need to capture this information. This information needs to be shared. It needs to be stored somewhere. It needs to be in either integrated network or a centralized network. And there has to be an openness to do this, because if that's not into the contracts, put it this way, if it's not in the contract, it's not going to happen. You don't have any teeth to enforce this in any imaginable way, and you're hoping they do the right thing, and there's nothing to enforce that. So the owner has to get very serious about that, or it doesn't happen.
And how might, for those people in the audience and those watching remote, as a developer, as someone in this space that you want to be able to have this information, but you may not know where to start, right? So wonder if either you or Bryan can speak a little bit about what's the first step, right, towards knowing what are those things that I should be aware of, right, and how do I make that as part of my process?
That's a very good question. So the way I've tackled this question before, I've looked outside of our industry to find out how is companies like Boeing doing it. How are companies like General Electric doing? How does Ferrari do this today? And how do every other industry in the world that manages complexity, how do they get things that are supplied all over the world, and how do they show up at the factory and they're built right the first time? How is Tesla building cars today? How are they doing this? And you realize when you start to look at that, the management of information becomes critical, and having putting in place the technologies and the processes in place that allow you to capture and manage and use information is essential.
Okay.
Because right now, one of the biggest enemies that we have to this is interoperability problems, and that too much of our technology is siloed. Right. So working with open standards, open systems of sharing information, whether it's people, interoperability is not only a technology problem, it's a people problem. A willingness of not wanting to share your data, your information with others for fear of 20 million things. But we need to move away from that model. We need a knowledge sharing, profit sharing, and risk sharing business model.
Perfect. So on that note, I know we're kind of getting called out. We have about 2 minutes. So just in a quick roundabout, really the main purpose for this, and thank you so much for kind of providing your unique perspective. But what I'm really interested in hearing about is that 14-year-old kid or someone who's looking to get into AR and VR. And I mean, obviously, you guys all bring a wealth of experience, and there's a lot of these roadblocks that you have to spend, 10, 15, 20 years in just getting to this point. So what would you tell to that person that's on the audience or watching remote who's looking to get into VR, and especially looking to rechange sort of the fabric of Miami or any other city for that matter, knowing what you know now, what's the best way for them to get started and not really kind of go through all this, trials and challenges that you face? Where should they be spending their time? So we'll start with you, and then we'll just kind of come around and wrap up.
Okay, so I guess 14-year-old kid that wants to get involved, or well, first thing I'd say is feel free to email me. My email is on my website. It's pravdaarchitecture.com, and I'll be happy to show it to you how the technology works, how I can get involved. Other than that, I would say just do it. Don't take no for an answer. I don't think there's a way to avoid the challenges. You will have challenges no matter what, because people naturally are resistant to change. It's an innate trait that most people have, because it's about survival, and safety is what's worked in the past. But I think in today's day and age and moving forward, we have to realize that the way you survive in today's world is by being ahead of everyone else and being at the forefront, because otherwise you fall behind. We're not in the caveman days. Technology is driving the change, and you have to be at the front of that. The way to do it is to take advantage of what's there. What's so great now is, I don't have to ask for a ride to the library, try to research things. I can go on my phone. If you don't have a phone, you can use a computer at school, and the world's information is literally right there. So just get into it. One of the things that I did, years ago was started subscribing to podcasts, starting to contact companies that were doing VR, getting on their beta test list, and just contacting people and getting involved. And it's really easy to do, so I highly encourage you to do it.
Perfect, thank you. And way less time than that. If you can just maybe do like 3 seconds, just some final thoughts around what we talked about, just briefly, because I know we're kind of running short on time.
Yeah, I would say that this is probably one of the most exciting times to get into design, architecture, engineering, some of these starchy industries, because we've been having a hard time of attracting new talent, the young youth, to this industry. But for the first time, for example, if you look at engineering, an engineering student can model a complex structural system, and they can experience it in ways that they've never been able to experience it. They can actually see the structural deformation. It is live. It's an experience. We're now entered the experience economy, so everything is going in this direction. It's not good enough to just do your standard structural analysis or engineering. Now, construction, engineering, these things can be stimulated, and you can experience your vision. So jumping is like a video game, but you're actually building the world around you.
Thank you.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah, so my recommendation is really take advantage of the upcoming innovation ecosystem here in Miami. There's a lot of young companies that are hungry and really willing to help new people entering into the industry, work with the companies here in the VR Expo, work with the emerging coding schools that are popping everywhere here in Miami, and really take advantage of all the change that is happening in this field here in Miami.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, guys. I think the most exciting thing for me and the takeaway is, 17 years ago when I came to Wynwood, we had no idea of how to translate and articulate what this vision would look like. And this was, pre a lot of the big Facebook social media days when it first started. Having tools like mixed reality and virtual reality in the design space as well is so necessary to be able to illustrate and articulate a vision of a place like Magic City that eventually will have 4, 5, 6 million square feet, 10, 15 buildings of all various types and sizes. So I think technology is going to be increasingly more important for us to tell the narrative and also to preserve our history and culture so people can know what came before us. What would South Beach have looked like if we would have demoed all those deco buildings? It wouldn't be the South Beach that we know it today. So it's about preserving history while innovating at the same time. And I think data is so important. Technology is really the tool to be able to solve a lot of those problems. So, I would encourage people to get involved in this burgeoning, up-and-coming ecosystem that's evolving in Miami. Get involved, jump on the bus or get left behind.
Thank you. So I think, I'll leave that as a final words. Thank you so much for coming. I know we went a little bit over, but obviously there's a ton of information to cover. So thank you all for joining us, and look forward to seeing you at the next panel.